Hey, Amber from Hollis Homestead, and today I want to talk to you about how to clean, really deep clean your Instant Pot. So I have a few things that you probably already have around the house that we're going to use today to get this thing all cleaned up and looking like new. If you've been using it now for a while, you've probably noticed a few things have gotten a little grimy. So I'm going to walk you through how to clean this thing up and make it look just like new. Alright, so let's get started. First with our lid. As I showed you before, everything that's removable, you want to take off. So if you're not familiar with your pot, you could go back and watch my unboxing video, how to get started with your Instant Pot. Take your cover off, that comes off pretty easy. Take the ceiling vent knob off, and then also your ring. This should be fitting pretty snugly in your pot. If it's getting loose, stretched out, or just really gross, you can replace that like I recommended before. The red one, in my case, I've gone through my first one, so that's my savory foods. I also keep my second one for sweet food, so if I'm going to make oatmeal or cheesecake or something, I wouldn't use my savory food ring because this one, it has a little odor. I can't remember. Ravioli is what I made in this last one. Sausage ravioli. So lots of spices, and that will retain the odor of your ring. So I'm going to show you how to get that odor out today, but also I recommend having more than one ring. The outer pot obviously can get a little gross. We're going to wipe that all down. I'm going to show you how to get that nice and clean. And then your inner pot gets kind of this rainbow effect inside. It's not necessarily dirty, but it's not shiny like it was when you first got it. So we can clean that up really nicely, very easily. The outer rim of the lid, you'll start to see some rice granules, some food that's dripped in there. Mine's looking pretty gross. So we're gonna clean all that out. And then the last thing is the condensation cup. This stuff here can all go in the hot soapy water, as well as your inner pot if you'd like. The condensation cup will fill up with moisture. It can get a little grimy. Mine's pretty disgusting. So we're going to clean that out. Hot soapy water or dishwasher for all these things, but today we're going to do hot soapy water, and we're going to get everything nice and clean. What we're going to use is a non-scratch sponge, brand new sponge. You can just use the scour side to do a little scrubbing when we get to the pot inside. These beveled edge paint brushes, you can get them at the craft store, the hardware store, really inexpensive. I always have these on hand for lots of projects, so these are great. I've got 2 of those, a few Q-tips, also some just white vinegar. I've got it measured out for cleaning, and that's going to be a cup of that. The other way I like to use it is in a spray bottle, and then also some microfiber cloths. These are specifically, these are Norwex brand cloths. They are antibacterial. They last forever. They're really, really durable, and you can clean almost everything in your house with them without having to use many chemicals or sprays or anything. So this one is for cleanings, antibacterial, and then this one is also antibacterial, but this is for polishing. So I will show you how to use all of this and get it all nice and clean. All right, we are going to submerge all of those parts that I told you needed to soak in some hot soapy water. We've got all of our pieces here, especially this stinky ring. And I'm going to use one of those little paint brushes that I had. I'm going to let this soak a little bit. This is going to help, as well as the sponge, get that nice and wet. This is going to help get in all the nooks and crannies of your lid, so get that nice and wet. So you can use this to run around your pot lid here. This fits perfectly in here to get in all these little nooks and crannies. That beveled edge works really well to get inside. And on the top as well, if you find that there's any buildup, anything gross. The outer part of the lid, here I would use my sponge and just really give that a good little scrub. Get that nice and clean. Also, your ring. If you notice on your ring that there's anything built up in this groove here, some spices or oils, you can take that beveled edge of this paintbrush and just run that all along there to get that nice and clean. Comes off nicely once it's been soaking. And then of course that yucky condensation cup. So this again fits right inside your condensation cup. Get down in there, rinse that off because it's really gross. Get that nice and clean. You can see how well that little paintbrush, this size especially, fits in there, and that came nice and clean. So looks really good. All right, we're gonna get all this stuff out to dry and move on to the inner pot. All right, now to the cooker base. You never want to put any liquid or anything, any moisture inside of your cooker base. So I've taken my inner liner out, but I am going to use that paintbrush again, still wet, hot soapy water, and I'm going to run that around and really scrub the rim of my pot. So you'll see some food debris start to break loose here. It's kind of grimy. You might need to just rinse that off in your hot soapy water. But take that little brush and really work that around. This works really, really well. Take that brush, clean that rim until you're satisfied. And then you could take the dry brush that you have and clean that edge again, or then you could take your dish towel or microfiber cloth and kind of fold that up and get that down in the edge to dry that. Make sure it's nice and clean. Also, these cloths you don't use any chemicals with, so I'm going to just get this wet, which you could do with any microfiber cloth, and I'm just going to wipe everything down here. So the outside of the pot, all the buttons, I'm going to give it a good scrub. And then I'm going to take my polishing rag and wipe it again because it gets it nice and shiny. So once you're done with that, you may have noticed there's some drips inside with the damp microfiber cloth. Again, don't put anything really wet, nothing. I can't wring this out, it's just damp. You could just wipe the inside of your cooker base out, but make sure this is absolutely completely dry before you use it. If you do this, you can wipe this out just ever so slightly. Get it nice and clean like the rest of your pot. And I always recommend having your pot unplugged for this, just as a safety precaution. So we're gonna let everything air dry, put the lid back together, and then we are gonna finally clean the inner pot, and then we'll be all done. All right, so the last thing we're gonna do is get our inner pot really nice and clean and pretty. I'm going to use a cup of white vinegar, like I showed you earlier. I'm gonna put that in my pot. Everything has dried. I've let everything air dry. I've reassembled my lid, put my sealing ring back in. I'm going to lock my lid in place. Vent knob to ceiling. I'm going to use the steam function, and we'll let it go for 4 minutes. No rhyme or reason, just want to get a good amount of pressure built up in there, let that steam really work, and then when that's done, we'll quick release the steam, and then we'll wipe out the inner liner and it'll look great. So see you in a few minutes. Okay, this is all done now. I'm going to release the steam and then we'll get that inner pot all cleaned up. All right, so our float pin has just dropped down, which means your lid is now safe to open. Take the lid off. A lot of condensation in there, so be careful. Lots of steam. Again, use your fin on your lid and rest that in the handle of your pot. That's also another way to let that air dry and not retain the odors by not having that lid locked on all the time. I'm going to use a dish towel to grab my pot out here. I'm going to kind of swirl that vinegar around a little bit before I dump it out. And dump it in the sink. I'm going to take that sponge I was using before, and nothing else in here, just a little remnant of that hot vinegar. Give it a quick little scrub, really doesn't need much. I'm going to rinse it out. We'll dry this so I can show you. Now the bottom of my pot is perfect again. Nice and shiny, just how it came. So make sure this is nice and dry, that it didn't get any moisture on it before you set it back in your pot. Excuse me. You could also, at this point, take this ring out and let it air dry a little longer. The vinegar is going to help with any retained odor. Some people recommend hanging this outside, putting it on a paper plate or hanging it somewhere on a clothesline. I have dogs, I have animals, so I don't think that would be a good idea personally. But you could take it out and still let it air dry. Maybe put it by a window if the weather's nice and you can air it out. But if you do air it out, that odor does go away. So I hope these tips were helpful on how to deep clean your Instant Pot. It does need it every once in a while. I always recommend the lid, all that after each meal. But sometimes you really need to scrub it up and get it nice and clean again. I'm going to get started with some meal prep for my week now that my pot's nice and clean. If you'd like some more recipes, other how-to tips, and you can check out my other videos on YouTube. Also, hollishomestead.com is where you can find me and my recipes with my Instant Pot. So have a great day. Thanks for joining me.